am Sharon Salzberg, and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar and give a shout out to Happify, which is what the platform that's allowing us to come together. And Happify is really feels like a family, and their warmth and their welcoming. So I'm speaking on behalf of them as well, and I urge you to really look at their website and see the different offerings, as well as the fact that this is being recorded. And so you will receive, those of you who registered will receive a link in about a week or so. And then after that, it will be up on the Happify website as well. So here we are discussing change and discussing real change and moving forward in a world that often feels like it's falling apart. So my book just came out. It came out September 1st, called Real Change. And so I have been immersed, of course, in thinking about change and thinking about what's real as well. Change is such a fascinating topic because we can see so many sides to it. There's the part of change that is really poignant, and it's about loss. It's about not being able to hold on. It's about disruption. It's about upheaval. Look at the times we are in. What can we expect? And somebody wrote to me, and in order to write back, I had to look up their old email to me, which they happened to send me on New Year's Eve, 2019, the last day of 2019. And what they had written was, I'm so looking forward to 2020. 2019's been kind of hard. And here, I just see I can let go of all that difficulty and have a sense of resilience and renewal. And I thought, yeah, right. I hope it worked out for you. So there's that side of change, which is true. And this time certainly intensely revealed to us. And the other side of change is what that person was referring to. It's about resilience. It's about renewal. It's about beginnings. It's about openings. Not being stuck, not feeling rigidly enclosed in the past or the expected, and being able to step forward. And they're both true. And somehow being able to hold them both is where we find a place of balance. I have a friend, Bob Thurman, who's a Buddhist scholar, and his favorite word in translation, I noticed, is realistic. And I used to listen to him speak as we were teaching together, and I think, that's really boring. What's inspiring? What's onward leading about being realistic? But as I thought about it more deeply, I thought, yeah, to be in harmony with the truth of how things are means that we're not working against ourselves. We're not being undermined by the unfolding of events in terms of our vision, in terms of our sense of possibility. To be realistic is pretty great, to be in harmony with the truth. And one of the most profound truths we can get in harmony with is the truth of interconnection, how our lives really are intertwined, they're interdependent. We may feel very alone, we may feel very cut off, but the truth is our lives all have something to do with one another. This doesn't mean that we like everybody or we like anybody even, but we find ourselves in one another. And we realize that the kind of construct that we hold of self and other and us and them is just a construct. It can be useful at times, but it doesn't have a kind of inflexible, unrelenting reality. It's a construct. In fact, it was Bob who gave me my favorite image of that, where he said once, imagine you're in a subway car and these Martians come and they zap the subway car so that those of us who are in there are going to be together forever. He said, what do we do? If somebody's hungry, we try to feed them. If somebody's freaking out, we try to calm them down. Not because we necessarily like them or approve of them, but because we're going to be together forever. Well, guess what? There's a truth to that. We can divide the planet up into little buckets and with borders and walls or whatever. But the truth is that we are all connected, that we are affected by faraway things, and that what we do, it matters where we put our energy, what we devote ourselves to, because that too will ripple out along these lines of connection. It's the truth of every day. It's the truth of every encounter. And if we're thinking about trying to affect change, coming closer to this is what makes it real. It's what makes it realistic. Because if we are in a kind of old paradigm of duality, which is like, I will vanquish you and then you will be undermined forever, or what happens over there is not going to affect me, it's too far away, then it will never be sustainable or really, in a way, meaningful change. I was once in a car with his friend, and we were caught in this terrible, horrible, awful traffic. And we were complaining bitterly about it the whole while. And then my friend turned to me and said, well, we're the traffic too, And I thought, oh, right. What's the sense of centrality? Like, I own the road. And you are an interloper in my way and slowing me down. Hurry up, it's mine. What happens when that sense of self and other drops? And here we are, we're all the traffic. We are sharing this planet, we're sharing these problems. And we can hold that vision even as we, step by step, see what is possible in a world of continual flux. Some of it has to do with the story we tell ourselves about what makes our own lives meaningful. It's very different, perhaps, than the story we are being told by others about who we are, whether we count or not, whether we belong or not, what is realistic. I mean, it's actually not in the hands of others to define that. It's up to our own sensibility to ascertain, to have discernment. Well, what is real, actually? And there are many, many, many myths being propagated all the time, not just now, where we have to come to a sense of knowing where to trust what's real. And that has a lot to do with our own perception and our own understanding. And then what is the story we tell about the change we want to see, what we think our limitations are, where we can go forward? And that is a very powerful kind of reflection to do. If you were going to define the theme, the motto of your life, what would it be? Like, I'm very fond of telling the story. I'm speaking to you now from Barre, Massachusetts, which is home of the Insight Meditation Society, which I co-founded in 1976. We moved into the building. And it's just through there and through the forest and in that direction. Now closed, of course, but for now. And when we first came to look at the property at the end of 1975, we weren't sure about what to do. Joseph Goldstein and I had met in India. Jack Cornfield was having a parallel life in Thailand at the same time. And we met up in the States and began teaching meditation. And it was very unclear in those days how many people would ever want to be meditating in the US or using this form, this particular method of meditation, of mindfulness meditation. So it was really uncertain. And we came to look at this property, which at the time was a Catholic novitiate. And the country was in the midst of what we were quaintly referring to as the gas crisis, where there were some really big properties and hard to eat heat, expensive to heat, and maybe not so many novices in that particular moment. And so there were a lot of church properties and such things, institutional properties being sold. So we looked at it and we were really torn about what to do. On the one hand, we thought, this is perfect. Mm-hmm. You know, it's very quiet, it's very peaceful, it's very pretty here. And then on the other hand, we thought, this place is really big. It sleeps about 100 people. And the then chapel would hold everyone in a meditation hall. And we couldn't decide what to do. Like, how many people will want to sit here? But, it's so great. So we went to downtown Barrie for lunch. And Barrie is a very classical New England town with a town green just in the center of it. And in those days, there was a monument on the town green which had engraved upon it the Barrie town motto. And it turns out that the Barrie town motto is tranquil and alert. So we took one look at that and we said, okay, that's an omen. Any town that has a motto like tranquil and alert should have a meditation center in it. Because we talk about meditation all the time as deepening quiet and tranquility and calm and peace, and strengthening energy and alertness and wakefulness and connection. We're really doing both in a very dynamic balance. So we did it. We bought the building. And it turns out that the main part of the building was first built, and then all these other wings were added. But the main part was built as a private home, as a mansion, by someone who at one point was Lieutenant Governor of Massachusetts. His name was Colonel Gaston. It turned out that Colonel Gaston himself had a motto that he tried to live by, which was, you should live every day so you can look every damn man in the eye and tell him to go to hell. So I first read that, and my first thought was, I wonder how well he was getting along with his neighbors, who perhaps were going around trying to be tranquil and alert. But I like telling those stories in juxtaposition because I believe we often do have a motto. We have some sensibility, conscious or unconscious, of what gives our life meaning, what it's all about. And this is very important to get in touch with. And sometimes it's very important to expand, because that sense of meaning, that story might be very small. It might be very conditioned. And it might have less to do with our own integrity and the fullness of our being and the process we bring forth, the wholeheartedness, the caring we bring forth in what we do, and more to do with a particular kind of external metric, like this many people will be reached, or this result will ensue in this many days, which leaves us frustrated and a very difficult position. We look at our story. What is the story we tell about what our life is about as we think about instituting or initiating change? We look at our vision of what's possible and try to hold a vision at the same time we hold reality, so that we're not avoiding one or the other. I tell the story in the book about, we have several centers here. In Barrie, we have the original retreat center. We have a center that's actually behind me called the Forest Refuge, which is also now closed for the moment, a center for more almost like self-guided study with teacher support, but less structured, like, in terms of schedule and things like that. And we have a center down the road called the Barrie Center for Buddhist Studies. So I remember the first time Joseph and this other friend, Sarah, and I went to look at the farmhouse, which ultimately became the Barrie Center for Buddhist Studies. And it was pretty run down and kind of falling apart. And I am somewhat famous amongst my group of friends for never seeing the possibility in a building or an apartment or something like that. Friends take me to something they're thinking of renting or buying, and I go, but they see like what it can become. So that's just what happened that day. I just looked at this place and I actually said out loud, please no, let's not do it. We can't possibly do it. Because all I could see was how it was. And to their credit, without being, just disconnected from how it was and in the clouds somewhere, both Joseph and Sarah could see how it was and see how it might be. And so we went ahead and bought it, much to my anxiety. And it's a beautiful jewel in an offering, to the public, and quite beautiful in so many ways. And so I realized that I can't do that with buildings. Interestingly enough, I feel I can do it with people. I, of course, encounter so many people in my life who come to me as a teacher, sometimes in a state of great distress, just divorced or just lost their job or just lost a family member or something like that. And sometimes I look at them and I just know deeply, I'm going to meet you in a year and you're going to be really happy. And I feel like I can do it increasingly just with life itself, which has been one of the benefits of my meditation practice. I can see how things are, more or less, and also have that kind of almost audacity of imagination, not fanciful imagination, but actually see the possibility of what might unfold, what might truly unfold as people come together, as we find ourselves, as we find a voice, as we come closer to making an effort, even though we may not see immediate results. And really, we have to be able to hold both the reality of how things are, even if it involves tremendous suffering, as it often does, certainly now, and that sense of possibility, which is the other part of change. Because if we only see the reality and don't have that sense of possibility, then we get despairing. We're so depleted, we're so exhausted, and we're just full of despair. If we only see what's possible and we're not in touch with the reality, then we're just ungrounded. We're just kind of floating above somewhere, and it's not actually sustainable change because it's not going to move the things that need to be moved. So we start with the story and we look at our vision and how we are holding both. And then we look at what's real in terms of effort we have to put forth. And, when I say change, it might mean it's a quality of manifestation. Maybe it's within our family. Maybe it's within our community. Maybe it's within a social structure. Maybe it's the best we can do in terms of this planet. There's not a particular domain, I think, that change has to rest in. But it means having a sense of integration of our deepest values and the way we speak to one another and the ways we speak to ourselves when we've made a mistake, the ways we meet a stranger, the ways we encounter adversity. And it is based on, in so many ways, being aware and having a quality of self-compassion and compassion for others. There's a kind of interesting to me part of the book that I wrote where I was talking about art and creativity, creative endeavor as a means of social change. And I tell a story in the book about being in the audience at a panel that was happening at Emory University some years ago with the Dalai Lama and Alice Walker and Richard Gere being the three people on the panel. And the panel was sponsored by the art department, so it was all about creativity. And the first question was a question I had been asked a variant of like 1 billion times, which was, does great art, great creativity need to come from tremendous suffering? Which is a very Western notion, actually, that the greater your torment, the greater your creativity will be. And it's not very Eastern as a notion, where art is considered something else. It comes from a place within of kind of balance and peace of mind and so on. So this was the question, and I was very interested because I've been asked it so many times myself. And Alice Walker was the first person to respond, and she said, well, I used to believe just that because that's how I was taught. That's what my mentors told me. But I really feel that the happier I get, the better my poetry gets. So that was interesting. And then Richard Gere talked about being an angry young man when he was a younger man, and kind of growing out of that. And then the Dalai Lama was really funny because there's a certain look he gets when he actually doesn't quite get the question. It was like, because it's so different from his own orientation. So what he said was, people are always taking me places to look at things, architecture or paintings or something, and they say to me, isn't it amazing? Isn't it beautiful? Isn't it wonderful? And he said something like, I'm sure it is, but in Tibet, we have the view that a work of art is great depending on what happens to the creator in making it. Like if the creator gets more enlightened, if the creator gets more present, if the creator gets kinder, that is considered a great work of art. So isn't that interesting? And that's what I mean by reorienting our own sense of integrity. It's so hard to gauge when change comes in the precise form we want it, in the magnitude we feel it needs to happen, and on our timetable. But we can be the best person we can be in the moment of trying to affect it. And that means across the board, talking to a shop clerk, relating to your neighbor. And I've heard so many stories that are so heartening in the midst of all the difficulty and everything that is going on right now, and as terrible as so many things are, and they genuinely are. Still, there are so many stories. So many people, say in New York City, have said to me things like, I've lived in this apartment for 12 years. I never even knew the name of a single one of my neighbors. Now we all have one another's names and phone numbers in case we need something. And so many stories like that. But that's what really gives me hope for the possibility of real and sustained change. It's how we become in the face of this moment and the values we want to manifest and what we want to bring forth. So here we are, holding all aspects of change and seeing our way forward in a way that has maybe a bold and audacious vision, and the recognition of what I might need to do right now. So why don't we meditate together some, and then I'm just going to open up the possibility of questions, which you can put in the Q&A box. If you look down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see Q&A. And once we finish the meditation, you're welcome to just put any questions in there. Okay, one of the things I've discovered in this time of a lot of stress is that one of the elements that really needs to be present in our lives is the element of rest. A lot of times we equate rest with laziness or giving up our efforts, but really it's just like restoring. It's only realistic, it's only sensible that we need just to kind of put the pause button on now and then. And pause doesn't mean like we're obliterating thoughts and feelings and making them go away. It means we're getting a little bit of space so that the whole maelstrom can be going on, but we're not so involved in it. We're not so lost in it. And usually we do that by establishing kind of a home base for our attention and resting our attention on it. And very commonly, not always, but very commonly, that home base is something like the feeling of the breath, the actual sensations of the in and out breath. So we find the place where the breath is strongest for us or clearest for us, the nostrils, the chest, or the abdomen. We bring our attention there and just rest. That's the instruction. I once turned in a manuscript, not this one, but an earlier book of mine, with a lot of guided meditations in it. And the editor, in sending it back, said to me, "You're using the word rest a lot. Are you very tired?" And I wrote back and I said, "Well, probably, but that's actually the word." Sometimes, say it's the feeling of the breath, people think if they get like a stranglehold on the breath, their minds won't wander and they'll actually wander more. So the instruction is to rest. Actually, the instruction is to rest lightly, the way a butterfly rests upon a flower. Thoughts may come, images may come, sounds, emotions, all kinds of things arise and pass away. We don't have to follow after them. We don't have to shun them or push them away. We're just resting on the breath. Everything else is coming and going and coming and going. And when we get lost, when we get sucked in, overcome, lost in a fantasy, or we fall asleep, truly don't worry about it. When you realize you've been gone, see if you can let go gently. And without judgment, see if you can come back to the feeling of the breath. Okay, so we're going to sit together. You can sit comfortably, see if you want to close your eyes or not. However you feel most at ease. We'll start actually by listening to sound. You can listen to the sound of my voice or other sounds. It's a way of relaxing deep inside, allowing your experience to come and go. Of course, we like certain sounds and we don't like others, but we don't have to chase after them to hold on or push away. Just let them come, let them go. And bring your attention to the feeling of your body sitting. Feel the earth supporting you. Feel space touching you. Then bring your attention to the feeling of your breath. Just the normal, natural breath. You don't have to try to make it deeper or different, wherever you feel it most distinctly. The nostrils, the chest, or the abdomen. You can bring your attention there and rest. See if you can feel one breath without concern for what's already gone by, without leaning forward for even the very next breath, just this one. And if images or sounds or emotions or sensations should arise, but they're not awfully strong, you can stay connected to the feeling of the breath. Just let them flow on by. You're breathing. It's just one breath. And if you do fall asleep or you just get spun out in a fantasy, truly don't worry about it. We say the most important moment in the process is the next moment after you've been gone, after you've been lost, where we have the chance to be really different. So instead of judging yourself and blaming yourself, feeling like a failure, see if you can let go gently and just bring your attention back to the feeling of the breath. No matter how many times you have to let go and begin again, it's fine. Early in my practice, I used to find myself kind of leaning forward. I was very hypervigilant. Couldn't be with just one breath. I felt like I had to get ready for the next 50. So I used to say to myself, settle back. Let the breath come to you. I also used to say, you're breathing anyway. All you need to do is feel it. I had so much performance anxiety. It's like I'd never done it before. Settle back. Get some rest. Let the breath come to you. You're breathing anyway. All you need to do is feel it. And no matter how many times your attention wanders, it's okay. You can let go and start over. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze, and we'll end the meditation. So thank you for that. So those of you who are interested in beginning or renewing or continuing on a meditation practice, the latest neuroscientist I spoke to about what it takes each day um, for measurable changes in your brain uh, is 12 minutes a day, but every day or close to every day. So earlier, a few years ago, a neuroscientist said to me 7 to 9 minutes a day. So, uh, and obviously nobody knows an exact number if there is an exact number, but um, the point is that no one is saying you have to do this 18 hours a day formally in a dedicated fashion, sitting for it to have an effect. I mean, 12 minutes a day is really an interesting uh, metric. It's not that inconceivable, really. I mean, it's hard to do anyway. It's hard to find the time or make the time, but it's not inconceivable. And so just to reflect on that for a moment. So please do feel free to put questions in the Q&A box if you want. So how do we deal with trying to create change when so many people are ignoring fact, science, and refuse to listen or engage in meaningful dialogue? I think, obviously it's a very polarized and difficult time in the US and probably around the world as well. And we have to seek to do the good that's in front of us, which may not mean, it depends. It may not mean that particular dialogue. I think in some realms, listening is a practice. It's not that easy, and trying to discern what people are actually saying. Um, but it in my mind, it comes down to really doing the good that's in front of us. And honestly, if you are a U.S. citizen over the age of 18, I think that means voting uh, and engaging in the political process, which some people sort of disdain. Um, but in my mind, it's actually very reflective of some of the Buddha's teaching about the innate worth of everybody. That everybody has innate dignity, everybody is worth something, everybody matters, everybody counts. And for everyone to have a voice and exercise that voice is one of the strongest ways we can take care of one another, and we can honor that. I sometimes tell a story about um, these friends I was with, and the son of the couple was about to turn 18. And I said, "Oh, you can vote." And there was just like silence at the table. And later on, the dad said to me, "We don't vote." And I said, "What do you mean you don't vote?" And he said, "Well, we don't really, believe in the political process, and, difference between candidates. This is not always the case, but difference between candidates is sometimes marginal." And I said to him in response, a lot of people live in those margins. Like, a lot of people live in a way that just a small incremental change around something will actually relieve them of a lot of suffering. So for the sake of the collective, I think that is a very, very important thing to do. And that may mean, in this coming election, it may mean locally, it may mean participating in some way. But that is what I think is really a crucial way to try to create realistic and important change. How do I accept change that has taken all that I once valued? I'm old, 62. I'm older than you uh, now, and I don't know what to do going forward. I feel too tired to reinvent myself, and for what, since I'll be dead relatively soon? Well, it is a time when it is very easy to feel despair. It just is. And I think that rather than add a sense of shame or humiliation to what one is feeling, it's being able to look at it realistically. I once was talking to somebody who said to me, I think I should be doing better. I should be feeling more balanced. I should be feeling calmer. And I said to her, well, I'd like you to make a list of everything that's happened to you in the last year. And she chose not to make the list. She chose to draw it out. And it was awful, And I said, let's look at this, like my house burnt down, my cat died, my brother got estranged from me, my mother got sick. And it was like, wow, no wonder. This is a lot to bear. So my first comment is give yourself a break and understand that, yes, people are depressed, people are exhausted. This has been a lot to bear. And no matter who you are, whether you've been in isolation or you've been working or you can't work anymore or whatever's going on, it's a lot to bear. And then I think what I really believe is that two things. One is that if we can find one person to help in a little way, that reunites us with a kind of strength and integrity and innate dignity within ourselves that otherwise feels lost. Before I left New York City, where I also have an apartment, I spent the month of February in California, and then I was in New York briefly before I just started feels really weird here. It doesn't feel good here. I have a home in Massachusetts. I think I'll go up there. So I did. Came up here March 14th with my snow boots, thinking I was going to be here for 2 weeks, and I'm still here. But I was teaching somewhere before, and it was a fairly large gathering. And the way they organized their events was that the speaker sits in the audience until they're introduced, and then they go up on the stage. So I was sitting in the audience and just chatting with the person sitting next to me, and she was incredibly anxious. It was certainly a very anxious time. I feel like collectively there's been a movement from anxiety to grief to anger to exhaustion. And part of the anxiety was that it was unclear what was expected of us. Here we were in this large gathering. Was it okay? Everyone was using hand sanitizer, but, is it okay? And she was incredibly, incredibly anxious. And she said to me, I didn't know if I should come, but I came. And I said, well, there's this kind of breathing, which actually, by the way, there is, where if your out breath is longer than your in breath, your parasympathetic nervous system will start to take over, your blood pressure will drop, and your whole nervous system will kind of chill. So I talked about that, and it did not resonate with her at all. So then I said, well, this kind of method of loving kindness meditation where you are consciously wishing well to yourself and to others, and that didn't seem to resonate at all. So then I said, is there anyone you can help? And she lit up, and she just got radiant. And she said, well, I do have this elderly neighbor, and I think she needs some help, probably getting groceries, so I can slip a note under her door. And all of a sudden, the anxiety was dispelled, at least for the moment. So I believe in momentary relief, because I think that's what restores us. I think that if we can establish a connection with someone and help them, and what's going to be hard is that it's not dismantling an entire system of oppression or making the planet okay, or, it's not going to have some magnificent result. But in that moment, we are relating to a different part of ourselves that's not so bereft, that's not so identified with what once was, but is resting in a kind of goodness. And we are able to be of some benefit to somebody. So there's a kind of connection. And that was the other thing I really believe in, is these things are very hard to face alone. They just are. And if we can have a sense of community, maybe it's a few people, or maybe it's online, or, whatever it might be, it's much easier, because as hard as things can be, when on top of it, we have a sense of isolation, and it's only me, and it's all that I will ever feel, then we're really sunk, you know. And if we can get help kind of discerning the difference between what's actually happening and what we might be adding to it, then there's a different quality of energy that happens. Have you ever heard of laughter yoga? I have heard of it, but I've never done it. It sounds fun. As you mentioned, Ree, the Tibetan view of art, can you tell us how you grew and awakened while you were making your latest work of art, your book? Thank you. I feel I really did. Thank you for the question. No one else has ever asked me that question, which is a great question. The process was really interesting because in creating the book, there are quite a number of activists and theater people and, you know, people trying to create change that we interviewed. And so I feel like, for one thing, I learned a lot from people. There's a woman in the book, for example, who was one of the leaders of the striking fast food movement in New York. People who work at fast food places were protesting, striking for minimum wage of $15 an hour and the right to unionize. And in meeting with this group of people, many of them said, you know, that, and first of all, they work very, very hard and they have nothing, often living in homeless shelters because they're not given a living wage. And they said, you know, many people had family members who were saying, basically, don't rock the boat, don't do anything that might jeopardize the very little bit you have, because then you'll have nothing. And she realized that no, she just couldn't. She and many realized that they couldn't live like that. And so it was a combination of two things. One was realizing she was worth something. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about the Buddhist teaching, which when I first encountered it, I thought was breathtaking. Everybody is worth something. Doesn't mean we like everybody. It doesn't mean we're not going to fight certain people's agenda or actions, but everybody has this kind of innate worth, even me, even you. And so she realized that. And then she said she looked at kind of the younger people coming to work and she thought, well, who's going to help them? You know, they're just going to fall into the same spiral that the rest of us have been in. And I have to do something for their sake. You know, and I just found so much courage and really interest that I think it really did affect me. And also, you know, there were people who, you know, a friend of mine actually who worked on the same-sex marriage issue for, like, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, you know, and the quality of patience and fortitude, you know, and forbearance and going forth. And maybe the thing that resonated the most in terms of my personal changes was the need to take in the joy, because I saw that with people and I heard it from people that, and again, it's like little moments, you know, when you're engaged in trying to create change, you've got to shift perspective sometimes, you know, go really big, like look at the sky, you know, go really immediate, look at a child smile, look at a flower popping up, you know, in a sidewalk. We've got to be able to take in the joy. And it's very hard because you feel guilty and you feel, you know, I shouldn't do that. It's like such a mess. And so many people are suffering and I'm suffering, and that it's, you know, it's just being lazy or conflict avoidant, but it's really important. It's like rest. And what's realistic? If we don't do it, we're just going to be exhausted and depleted and depressed. And so taking in just like some moments of joy, and that really resonated with me, and it's something that I really remember. Greetings from the UK. Hi. What time is it? I'm currently trying to increase the kindness in my mindfulness, relating to experience with more kindness, instead of just interest and bare attention. I'm interested in how you blend kindness and metta into your mindfulness practice as distinct from metta practice. Okay, metta, M-E-T-T-A, means loving kindness, and it is its own particular method of meditation. I think, many times one is doing it, blending kindness, and even if you don't realize it, because how do we have interest actually in something, especially when our conditioning is to fight it? Something arises, a certain emotion, we don't like it, we want to push it away. Or our attention wanders, we get distracted. How do we let go and begin again? That's not easy, because just using this last example, our tendency and our great conditioning can be such that our attention wanders and we immediately spiral out. I can't believe I'm thinking again. No one else ever thinks when they meditate. I'm the only one who ever thinks. I think such stupid thoughts, if they're thinking thoughts, which they're not. But if they were, they'd be beautiful thoughts. They'd be sublime thoughts. I'm the only one who thinks such ridiculously stupid thoughts. And that can go on for a very long time, in which case we have added sometimes a considerable length to our distraction. And we're so demoralized at the end of that, we don't feel the energy to pick up and go on. And so even if we don't call it self-compassion, even if we don't ever use those terms, it's like the secret ingredient in actually being able to let go and begin again. And just as it's the secret ingredient in interest. Interest actually, in the Buddhist psychology, is one of the qualities that's the antidote to aversion, to pushing away, to dislike. And energetically, they are very different. If we're pushing away, we're pushing away. If we're interested, we're kind of like, what's that about? So I think you have added already, if you're working with interest or curiosity or mindfulness, there is a quality of kindness that is inherent to it, or it's not really mindfulness, in which, you can tell. One of the tools, one of the particular techniques of mindfulness training is mental noting, where if the word comes easily, we apply a label to our predominant experience. We did a tiny bit of it in that sitting with the breath, where you may not be only feeling the in and out breath, but you might be mentally saying in, out, in, out. So then your sitting might look like in, out, joy, joy, sorrow, in, out, something like that. And again, it's a particular technique. It's not the only technique, and it's only if the word comes easily. But sometimes, if you find that technique useful, it's like an immediate feedback system, which is one of its uses, because you might hear yourself say, in, out, thinking. And that's a clue, that it's not actually a kind recognition of what is going on, but it's full of judgment. So just noticing something's happening doesn't mean we're being mindful of it, which has the attendant meaning of not adding grasping, aversion, or delusion to what our noticing is. So there are lots of ways in which we can just kind of notice the quality of our relationship to what's going on, and that's it. If you resent what you're feeling, if you're pushing away thinking, if you think something else altogether has to be going on, then, it might just be softened, something like that, and you'll find more kindness there. Is your book Real Happiness, including 28 Days of Guided Meditation? Yes. That book came out 10 years ago. It was just reissued this year with renewed science and examples and some new meditations, and it is a 28-day program. of guided meditation. My neighbor moved a few months ago and we were very close. The entire neighborhood has changed to the point of no one staying in touch with one another anymore. How do I deal with this change? Well, what's hard but important is to be able to be the first. You know, David DeStena, who's a professor at Northeastern University, did this study of meditators. And one of the conclusions of the study is that even if you're doing, say, mindfulness meditation and you're not specifically doing a loving kindness meditation, it will increase compassion. And the way they found that was that after some group had practiced meditation for 8 weeks, they had people come into the lab for what they were told was going to be the final part of their research piece. And really the final part was happening in the waiting room of the lab, where there weren't very many chairs, and either a meditator or a non-meditator, you know, in different times, were occupying one of the chairs. And then the rest of the chairs were taken up by actors that David had hired. And the actors were all like on their phones and not paying any attention. And then this actor came in that he'd hired on crutches and looked like they were in incredible pain. And the question was, who gets up to offer their chair to this person who looks like they're in incredible pain? And some enormous percentage more of meditators than non-meditators got up to offer their chair. And it was considered to be an important finding because they had to be the first. Like everyone else was on their phone. It wasn't just like you saw someone else do a good deed, so you think, hey, I'll do that too. You had to be the first. And so I think that's the position that many people are in now. And it's hard to be completely alone and be the first. It's nice to have at least one person, you know. But nonetheless, doing the good that is in front of you seems really important, which includes connecting. Okay, so we need to stop now. It's been really wonderful to hear what you're thinking about, and really wish you all well, and that we can all stay in touch in some way as we try to navigate this time. So thank you.